Hello and welcome. So today I'm talking of the honor and pleasure of talking with Cielle Backstrom, who is actually a dear friend of mine and works in a lot of different fields and a lot of different territories, working with personal development, working with personal growth, working with empowerment. And I'm just going to start letting Cielle talk and describe it a little bit more. So Cielle, do you mind telling us a little bit of how you work with individuals and people?
Yeah, and maybe I'll share just a little bit more of my background too, because that'll inform people as to how it is I work with people. But when I was 14 or 15, I had a really super blowout epiphanal unitive experience, which I completely did not understand. And in fact, it kind of put me into a tailspin for several years, thinking that maybe I was crazy. Because it was so, the only thing I could think of is that maybe there's got to be someone else in the world that has had a similar kind of experience, because it felt very godly, but I'd never heard anyone that I associated with God ever talk about an experience such as this in ways that I could understand. So it left me feeling kind of crazy and not really wanting to talk to anyone about it, because then I would for sure know that I was crazy, but also left me seeking. And in my case, fortunately, when I was just in my early 20s, I started transcendental meditation. And even in the first several minutes of meditating, a similar flavor to this unitive experience came up, and I thought, oh, I'm not crazy. Other people have felt this deep state of connection to the universe. And then I really started being assured that I wasn't crazy. It was like, okay, so how can I now grow with this? And so my life has led me on a lot of different paths, which I think of more like threads in a tapestry that all are weaving together into a beautiful cloth. And it did include learning to be a teacher of transcendental meditation, but also led into becoming a teacher of a work that's called Trillium Awakening. And it's an embodied awakening path. I could talk more about that later. My husband and I have trained in energy healing based primarily on native North and South American traditions, and heavily based in Peru. And we've also more recently finished holotropic breathwork training, which was founded by Stanislav Grof, who has a very fascinating background that we might talk about as well. And I also assist people in a process that's called inner relationship focusing, which helps them find through their body what is true in the moment, as opposed to trying to figure out with the mind, which is what we so often do, is to try to figure out in the mind what's happening, instead of just dropping into the body and finding out what is the truth in this moment, which is a beautiful process that I weave all of these kind of traditions somewhat together. Not always together, but flavors of all of them come into the work that I do with people. And so mainly, my purpose in being with people is to help them find out who they are, but not just who they are in an ego sense way, but that and who they are in an essential way. And there are common flavors that we all have, and then there's unique, it's like we're a beautiful field of flowers, and they're all beautiful, and there's also unique blossoms that each one of us is. And I love to sit with people and help them discover who they are. And so that's kind of a broad brushstroke of what I do, and I'd welcome you to, if there's anything about that sounds interesting.
So many places. I do want to go back to your, what did you call it, unitive experience. I love that term. But one of the things that we've talked about in our dialogues in over the years is this state of call it oneness for lack of a better word, which you probably have one, that it is beautiful and it is fulfilling and it's comforting and it's home, and it's also slightly boring because it's unchanging. So if you could just right at the beginning, because we all feel like, or in spiritual journeys, we're often told that end game is to be, we all are one, we're of that oneness, and it could be a yes and no at the same time because there's these both and things. But if you don't mind speaking to that just for a moment, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love that you're asking that question, because I think I also kind of like try to demystify what an awakened life is in terms of people come to me and said, I just want to be in the non-dual. I want to understand consciousness. And often what I'm really hearing is it's not the non-dual. I actually want to separate from my humanity and find this state of eternal peace and expansion. That's actually very dualistic to me, to actually exclude half of who we are for a state of eternal peace. And, again, what I often say to people, that field of pure consciousness, I believe it exists. It's my direct experience, and I've known many people that experience it. And when we start talking about the qualities of it, it's a field of non-change. It is a field of non-change. It is a field of non-change. There's nothing actually there. There's pure potential, which can be very it can quicken things in us. But it, in and of itself, is a field of no change, non-change. It's eternal. It's never going to change. It didn't change before we were born. It's not going to change after we were born. There's a feeling of oneness and expansion. But there's not a lot about it because it's just kind of isness. It just is. And so, once we've met that and understand it to be fundamentally who we are, it's, well, where do we go from there? I'm still that field of non-change. There's not a lot of juice there. And so the real juice is actually bringing that into life and living. And like I said, instead of pushing away our humanity in favor of this field of non-change, which, like I said, is sometimes paradoxically called a non-dual state, which means actually it's a divisive state for many people, not for everyone, but for many people it's a divisive state. When we can reunify the whole body and the field of change with this field of non-change, it can be a really glorious life. Unpredictable too,
Predictable, right. And it doesn't mean that we're, that everything's, butterflies and rainbows all the time if we've got in touch with that state. There's still this process of things moving. I'm just going to say that.
Yes, exactly.
So with that thread, I just came back from Ireland 2 weeks ago. It was amazing, which I think we've talked about Ireland before a little bit. Yeah. I'm actually not Irish in any way that I can officially claim heritage and find it. My Celtic background is Welsh, which I have not even gone to Wales. I'm not afraid. I won't say afraid, but I'm avoiding Wales for some reason. It'll come. And what I found there is this beautiful, expanded amorness to the relationship with the goddess, with the feminine, with the divine feminine, that type of thing. And this, the languaging, because you and I have talked about channeling before a little bit, and I have had my own little challenges with how I want to embody that, and so the word came to me over there, and it's definitely, I don't think it's new at all, but embodied channel, which is, to me, kind of what you're talking about, this whole body feeling. It's not just thought blocks, it's this using this whole vessel in a way to bring forward that the way that the force moves through me, and how I express that. It was it was like a moving to that different voltage, in a really fabulous way. But as you were talking about this, it's that the divine human. The word that's come to me over the past month has been metahuman.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Like metaphysics, like all of metamorphosis, and it just means the after. Etymology wise,
right.
It's after. Yeah. So I'm not going to stick to it because I rarely stick to anything. And that infusion of this source, this field, the way the universe flows through us, it's definitely seems like across the board, I mean, we see a lot of things dissolving, a lot of dissolution, a lot of things breaking down. And it does seem to me that possibly those of us kind of on the leading edge, those of us in whatever field we want to call that, have it's more of a possibility, or perhaps just more of an influx of this energy, and how we I don't know what the word was, how we bring it together, how we unify it. I don't know. Do you have ideas about that?
Well, first of all, I love what you just were saying. Ideas of how we unify it. Also, just I'm going to spin off for just a moment before I get back to that. Is so I actually am an Irish citizen, although I've only been to Ireland once in my life, but I still feel that land very deeply in my body. And one thing that I do appreciate about, both from my Irish grandmother and grandfather, but then also being there, is how aware the people are of more subtle dimensions of life that that we a lot of times don't. It's not part of what in the U.S. is part of consensual reality. Whereas in Ireland, part of consensual reality is not just worshiping the goddess, but it's actually asking the fairies permission before you pick a tomato, or before you go into one of their sacred sites. We're always giving them milk and oats and whiskey to ask permission. You've been guarding this site for thousands of years. May we join you in it? And so that whole thing that becomes very exciting to me when we are looking at the whole range of life, not just the field of non-change, but the field of change includes not just this body, but all of the subtle relative things that are not always consensual, but it depends on where you're raised, because different parts of the world consent to subtle energies in ways that Western modern man doesn't always consent to anymore. So it's how do you dance with everything from the unmanifest through the subtler realms of manifestation up into the more gross field, which is maybe our own human bodies. And for me, a lot of that, the answer to a lot of that is to be in the present moment, because everything that's happening is happening in the present moment. If you're going, whether it's going to talk to a fairy or, just sit and meditate or whatever, it's going to happen now. And one thing that's always in the now is our body. Our body doesn't know how to be in anything other than the now. So it's a beautiful, beautiful ally if we want to be in the present moment. And even a lot of awakening schools are about, be here now, be in the present moment. And you don't have to figure it out with your mind again. The body is in the present moment. So access the body and engage with what you find there. So, most people, it's not, I think it is kind of consensual reality in the United States that we'll, walk down a street and we find like, the hairs on our arms are sticking up because we have a sense for something. I once even heard that someone was interviewing, probably for a PhD dissertation, people that had been mugged. And something like 95% of them had a feeling it was going to happen before it happened. Right? But they overlooked that feeling. In fact, they might have even thought, I shouldn't go to my parked car right now. And they'd overlook that feeling. So again, but what picked it up? Their body picked it up, right? So, part of the answer to almost, I feel like a whole lot of things in life is stop, pause, and listen to your body. And then, after you've paid attention to it, if it gives you information, attend to that information instead of going, oh, it's probably just a coincidence, or it doesn't matter.
And so as you're saying that too, one of the things that we need as humans, and I'm going to say a need, not a need, we really want, is this linear, this language-based understanding. And it doesn't come always like that. It doesn't always come like that. Sometimes we just need to let it sit and gel and gestate in our body and work its way around and do whatever magic it's doing in there. And then eventually, if we try to put words to it too quickly, sometimes I think it's almost like we can stop the process.
Yeah, it's like we lock it down sometimes. And, if words come quickly that really match what you're feeling, go with them. But not to try to impose words or linear thinking quickly, because just like you said, it can stop the process because your body go, okay, well, you're not trusting me now. I might as well stop telling you anything.
Okay, so in that realm, maybe sort of, we've talked about, so I've had, I think with you, I came to the term of cosmic experience. So I've had I don't know if I'd call it a unified experience. It was quite intense, and had a lot of qualities to it. And And I did a little report. I don't know if I showed it to you on spiritual emergence and emergency. Just
I'm glad that you did that. I haven't seen it yet, but yeah, I look forward to seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you and I actually did a video on this Ireland trip, which I think you'll like too. So I'll give you those links. But one of the things that when we started working together, you talked about the cap, and I don't know if I worked with that. I think I probably did, and I think I still probably do sometimes. I have to kind of like dial things down, like less comes in, more, open it up, close up. Can you speak to that a little bit about there are a lot of sensitive people out there that get overwhelmed with energy.
Yeah, no, in fact, I do work. I feel like I sort of attract people that are empathic and get loaded with energy. So it's kind of can both, one, they might be running a lot of energy in their own body, but typically they're also very empathic to the energy that's around them. And so, yes, sometimes, just there can be many methods of dialing things down and knowing it's okay to dial things down. I mean, even for me, I was working with one psychospiritual teacher at one point in time, and she just asked me, like, where do you find yourself in this room? And I closed my eyes, and I knew where the edges of my body was, but I was actually kind of finding myself sort of filling up the whole room, and I thought, that's really cool. And she goes, well, you're going to get bumped into a lot. Like, I mean, if your energy field is that big, if there's anyone else in the room with them, that means you're feeling their energy probably more than you can manage at the point in time. And she just, for instance, the exercise she gave to me, she said, kind of pretend like you have your body is a big net around, or this energy field of you is a big net, and see if you can kind of reel it in so that it's closer to your body. And I thought, but I'll lose, I won't feel, so I can sense things. She goes, yeah, and you're going to feel so much more grounded and stable as a result. And know that you can let it go out when appropriate, but you can actually work with it. So, and this, like you also mentioned, like kind of an energetic helmet, because I also found in my own life, just, based on my proclivities, already have been born with, but then how I handled stress was often to really escape my body. And that's, in times of high trauma, most people do that. They split off, they go away, they're not conscious to the trauma. But I'd kind of taken to an extreme, and I just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to live out in the ethers. And, so again, someone called me back into my body and put a little energetic helmet over it to keep me in my body. So I didn't escape unnecessarily. And I had to work with that for about 9 months of keeping my energy circulating in my body. And it turned out it wasn't a detriment. It was actually in my favor. And also because of the work that I do with people, some of it energetic work, I have learned through Peruvian traditions how to put kind of protective bands around me. And I've heard of many traditions that do this. The one I use works for me. It might work for other people as well. But a lot of people that I work with, it's an empowerment that I will offer them of just protection, energetic protection, so that they don't feel like they're too porous to, like walking into a room and suddenly getting a headache because, someone else in the room has a headache sort of thing, Let them have it. You don't have to have it with them, so.
I love that. Okay, so moving into your Peruvian world a little bit, one of the things as I was walking through Ireland, as I placed my feet, and this is through thick-soled shoes, which I'm not even used to wearing, that I was just drawn to the earth. I was just magnetized each step, and it was so cool, and it was beautiful, and it felt great. And it was enlivening without being overwhelming. It was beautiful. And I remember this often. You were talking about I think it was the shaman or the elder, that you guys were going up a mountain, or it was a story about going up the mountain, and everybody was exhausted except for the oldest guy on the walk. Do you remember that story?
We'll keep going, because I know a couple that might start the same way. But how does this one end?
Well, it was that the younger people were asking him, how come you're not tired? How come to this older man, it was a man, and I don't know what his status was, but he was like, I'm walking with the earth's energy, every step, I'm walking with the earth, and so it's like I'm energized with each step. Does that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's just, those kind of stories are so abundant there. I'll just tell another little story. There was someone we were supposed to meet, and she got engaged with something else. So she called up one of her cousins and say, here, come and spend some time with Jeffrey and Cielle. Now, I speak a little bit of Spanish, and despite what many people think, a lot of Peruvians don't speak Spanish. Actually, it's not their first language. And so he spoke also a little bit of Spanish, so we could kind of get along. And he decided to take us for a walk around a beautiful, riverbank. And we ended up going kind of near dusk. And a couple times he'd say to us, "Would you like to sit down to rest?" And I was actually, frankly, feeling a little insulted, like, "Oh, you think I'm an old gringo and I can't keep up with you, and you want to give me to rest." And I thought, "No, I'm doing okay." And he took us along the river and took us other places. And a couple of times, "Would you like to sit down and rest?" And I said, "No." And then we turned around and started coming backwards. And now it was actually starting to really, the sun had already set some time ago. It still wasn't dark, but it was getting darker. And there's no traffic, street lights at all. And even when we finally get to the street, there's going to be no street lights at all. And I'm going like, I don't think we should really want to be out here in the dark. But he said, "Would you like to sit down and rest?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "The energy next to this river is so great. We should sit down and meditate for a little while." And you see, the thing is that he was all the time meaning, he just said, "Would you like to rest?" which didn't mean rest. It mean, would you like to drink in the energy from the river and sit on the ground instead of just walking in the ground and feel the trees and things like that. And I was interpreting it like rest, because I'm getting tired. And when he finally said, that it's like our walk's almost over and you haven't sat down and communed with this river. I've asked you 3 or 4 times because the energy by this river is so great. We need to just sit down and be with it and meditate with it. And then I said, "Oh, yes." And so again, this is just part of their everyday life. They don't even think twice about the fact that you receive from the elements always. But you make a conscious effort to receive from the elements, and that's why you can keep on walking, is because you're receiving with every step, actively receiving. So yeah. These kind of lessons that it's like, whoa, how many times does he have to hit me on the head with this before I...
Just lovingly offering it to you.
Again and again, thinking that of course I'll get it, but of course I was raised in a different different part of the world that doesn't get our connection to the natural kingdom and how, we can be enlivened. It's not just by the food we take in. A lot of us know that different food has qualities and plants have qualities, and even to smell them sometimes is very healing. But just to sit on the earth and consciously engage there, yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be a different world if we did that, if we were taught that, if we, because probably as children we inherently have that sense. We roll in the grass, we lay, and then...
Yes, absolutely. Another little tidbit that one of the Peruvians told us once, which I think was also brilliant, but of course we were going to be taking a rather long walk up in high altitude, and he just suggested that on the way there we'd do a lot of walking in silence, and we'd pick up a stone that was big enough that we could fit it in the palm of our hand. And then the example he gave, they're just like so everyday examples. He said, so maybe you have an Uncle Joe, and you and Uncle Joe have a little bit of, not feeling completely compatible with each other right now. He said, so every few steps, just whatever you're feeling that's not great towards Uncle Joe, just take that feeling out of you and blow it into the stone, And so I found my equivalent of my Uncle Joe that I was, just had judgments against and didn't, why are they treating me this way, etc. And I kept blowing it into the stone. Now, when I started this walk at mile 1, the stone was just a stone in my hand. At about mile 6, this was one of the heaviest stones I felt like I'd ever carried. And I thought, why did I pick up such a big stone? It's so heavy. I can't stand carrying it anymore. Well, it was taking all of that, really I should say negativity towards that person, and holding it for me. And then we actually, even when we got to the top of the mountain and we were going to camp there, and I was thinking, oh, great, there's a beautiful, lake up here, glacial lake. Maybe I can put the stone in the lake. He goes, actually, what I want you to do tonight is I want you to put on your gloves because it's going to be really cold. And I want you to slip that stone into your glove at night and hold it all night long, So again, because they believe that the dream world is also a time of deep healing, because our mental faculties have gone to sleep. And so we don't have that trying to figure things out going on. We have that we have that opportunity to find things out in the dream world. And again, so then we had, we kept the stone with us all night long as well, and did a couple more things with it. But still, again, this we think sometimes we have to, and the thing is, when all of the ritual was done, my relationship to this person was actually one of compassion. Now, I never actually had to work anything out with the person.
Right? That's amazing.
I know. So again, the natural world can really be when we don't think of it as just being taken for granted and it's not really of value. Like you said, every step you took in Ireland was one of connection.
And honestly, like if I think about it, every step wasn't like that. But when I was,
I
mean? Yeah. I mean, when I was noticing it, every step had that sensation.
Yeah, I love that. When you put your attention on it, yeah, the power of our attention. When you noticed it, that's what was there. Wow, beautiful.
Okay, so that leads me to, with all of these different places and essences and energies that you work with, how have you heard the Earth is doing these days? Have you heard any?
Yeah, good question.
Because I'm hearing a little bit like it like things are shifting in I'm going to say major way. For me.
I mean, typically in terms of our Peruvian friends, they do feel that it's been actually probably good 20 years, close to 20 years of shifting, and their prophecies would said to them, especially, I mean, it was something as simple like when your glaciers start to melt, it means we're in a time of turning over. Now, they don't always look at turning over as being a bad thing, but it's something that you probably have to kind of keep your wits about you. You know, it's like that more attention is needed at those times of turning over. They do look at it as like, we can turn things over and something new that wasn't there before can arise. But during that time of turning over, it can be feel very destabilizing, especially for sensitive people. So they call it a Pachacuti. Pacha just means time or space. Many people have heard the word Pachamama, which is a reference to Mother Earth. But it's actually, Pacha is much more than just a space or earth. It just means space-time continuum. And so Pachamama is the mother of space-time continuum. She's much bigger than just this Gaia, this Mother Earth. And Pachacuti, Kuti means turning over. So it's a time of where space-time is getting turned over. So they have talked about that. And, and for us to be, in fact, part of what we were told is by one of my teachers there is when I asked him, why are you teaching me so many of your traditions and so many of your blessing ceremonies and so many of your initiations? I am a gringo that's going to take it back to the U.S. and completely inadvertently change it. Why are you doing that? He said, because again, in this time of turning over, we have to get our knowledge out to as many people as possible so it won't disappear. We'll take the risk that you will actually change it, but you probably won't ruin it, And we have to take the risk of that's what we need you become our missionary almost for us. We send you back to keep this work alive. Yeah, it was like, oh my goodness. It was like one time, this one ceremony that I was being taught, like after I'd seen one in my entire life. And the next day is, okay, now we're teaching you how to do this. And I said, well, I have no background. I have no anything. And he goes, you know how to breathe, You're a human. That's the only requirement we have right now is that you're a human, and plus they must have trusted too, It's like, no, you need to learn this so that the life will continue as smoothly as possible, especially in this time of transition. And, just one thing I do like from a couple of different, there's different traditions in Peru that have overlapping cosmologies, but there's the North Coast, which is a desert land. There's the jungle, and then there's the Andean land. And there's actually blendings of the cosmology in all of those areas, because there was some rendezvous places. But especially I've heard recently from someone, North Coast person, and also a mountain person, medicine man, that they also consider this eclipse they consider it to be a very auspicious time of the sun, the father energy of the sun, and the mother energy of the moon in union. And that actually, again, it could be a time of that union could be very intense, and for some people it could be felt more intensely if there's imbalances, especially inside of you. But that is a beautiful union, and we just went through, that eclipse, and especially they would note that, it went through North America such that almost everyone in the United States had some partiality of eclipse, and a huge part had total eclipse, where they say that sun and the moon energy are just being united. That idea that the masculine principle and the feminine principle need to be respected and kept in balance, at all times. And so this is a time when the two are embrace, and can also create great balancing for those who are sensitive in their own life and paying attention to the balance that's needed. So, but I'm just curious from you if you'd like to share a little bit about what you've heard about this kind of energetic and Mother Earth centric transition that we're in.
Yeah, let's see if I can put it into words. Well, I've heard specifically that the Earth is on a shift, almost like everything has different dimensions, and that there's this possibility of shift. But as you talked about this, would you call it turning over?
Yeah.
And I was talking with so we were with Native Irish speakers and people who were telling Myth of Ireland, and there's a people called the Tuatha De Danann, and they are people who turned sideways into the light and disappeared. I heard that's a David Whyte poem, and I had been so curious about these people. That's actually why I started reading and listening to David Whyte. I'm like, who are these people? So I was asking everybody on this trip, who are these people, and what's their history, and and I have just a small bit of it, but many societies that I feel and I've heard, many societies have figured out how to turn sideways into the light and move into something else. So this turning over kind of quality, I feel like we're at a possibility or a threshold in something like that. And as even back when with my cosmic experience, one of the things is like I've kind of always lived on the fringes, lived on the edges of things, for lack of a better word. And what I felt like I did, and part of it is I fell back into myself for that experience, but part of what it was bringing this energy from the outside in and turning things inside out. It was exactly how it was. And as I was at dinner one time in Ireland and talking to this guy whose father studied folklore in Ireland, and he was a scholar and an expert on it and that kind of thing. And so he's like, so what do you think, what's your edge, kind of thing. And I was like, I'm just going for it. So I was like, I feel like there's this thing that we're like kind of grabbing onto threads of energy, those of us who know what we're doing. And I didn't even say it this well, and I'm not even sure this is coming out well, but we're grabbing onto whatever threads we've put into this earth, into humanity, into the earth, into people. We've spent this part of our life up until now putting these threads in, right, and holding on to these threads. And now I find myself, it's not detaching, because that's not a word that I'm fond of, but it's like taking a step back or taking a step out. So just not engaging in the same way, I'll say it that way, not engaging in the same way, and I'm letting my imaginary world, my world of nonlinear thinking, just kind of hold me in a different way. And so with these threads, what it feels like, and this is what I said, like there's this kind of taking these threads and like kind of pulling the earth through this portal, which if I talk to many people about that, it makes no sense. And you have gone into this other realm, and there's something about that keeps speaking to me. So I don't have the exact words for it, but I think there is this kind of turning inside out, this kind of moving from one world to the other, however we want to call it, moving from masculine to divine masculine feminine balance. I don't know. I don't even know what the magnetics and all of that will look like in the end, but I do feel like it's very important for me to keep hold of those threads that I've put in and to do something with them. That's all I have.
I love this. Thank you. And, but you're talking about that, always finding that balance point between, like you said, you don't like the word, like whatever was disengaged or something like that, but to find the right relationship between who we are and what we're doing. So that, because if we completely merge with things, we actually can't be of much service. So for instance, if we're sensing chaos and change in the world and we merge with that, well then we can't be part of the solution anymore, because we're just merged with the chaos. So finding a way to step back and still not to dissociate from, but to step back a little bit from and stay with an appropriate connection of, whether we can be in reciprocal exchange to something, as opposed to either exiling it completely or merging with it, where we can't actually have a dance with it at all. And so I was kind of hearing you talk about that, about these threads. They're not maybe pulling you so directly in, but you're still in connection with them. Yeah, which is, I think is beautiful.
And I think, like, as you're talking, it made me remember the quality of, so as things dissolve, as there's these dissolution, everything has its time, right? As it's a dissolution of whatever cycle it is, there has to be, and this feels, even right now, more important to me, there has to be a creation phase. There has to be those who are either imagining or envisioning or living in this world that's not quite of this world to actually kind of help the world move into. So that's kind of that pulling through.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And, just so many, I'm going to just be very simplistic here, but you talked about imagination and that's an imaginal world. That those kind of worlds, whether we want to call it the transpersonal world, which is more Jungian psychology, or we want to talk of the imaginal world, Henry Corbin, who I can barely understand, but still talked about that imaginal world. And then, the Sufis and all of the alchemists from which the Sufi tradition came, which arose from the Sufi tradition, all of these of wanting us to find those more subtle levels that we can still work in to actually maybe even produce change. And it's not like every one of us has to be a master of all of that transpersonal or imaginal world, but to actually not have those such denial about that there is this this interconnection. So I had talked a little bit earlier about a unitive experience that I had in which I felt like I really was one with everything in the universe. And yet there's also, so there's unitive experiences, but there's also those deeper imaginal experiences that show us the interconnection. Maybe not I'm feeling one with the universe, but I'm sensing the interconnections that are below the surface that are also can be attended to and can be very exciting. Actually, in a sense, much more exciting than a unitive experience where there's I'm one with everything, but there's no one thing that's actually I can work with in a sense. It's almost like everything is dissolved into oneness, whereas these transpersonal experiences, meaning beyond any specific personhood, but entering a realm of also Jung called it the collective unconscious. It's like it's not in our normal consensus consciousness, but it's a world that connects all of us in a web, And so, in many cultures talk about a web or a net that unites all of us. But to actually find that doesn't have to just be a word or a theory. It's something we can engage with, and it's actually. I don't think it's that hard, actually.
Do you think it takes practice, or do you think that kids that have come in or people that have come in have a more natural connection with it? Or
I do believe in those theories that some of the people that are being born these days have a more natural inclination to go there. And it might, or maybe, I don't know if it's worldwide, but, life has gotten to be a little bit easier in the U.S., and there are still a lot of strife, but we're not not struggling in many, many different ways to find our country and find our territory and things like that. And so it frees up energy to be able to explore some of these more subtle dimensions. And it does feel like a lot of our younger generations are naturally more inclined to be willing to investigate at this level. Not everyone, but that's so great. But I think everyone that I really have almost not talked to anyone, and maybe again I just track those people. But if I ask them, did you ever in your life just feel kind of right with the world, What was that experience? And as people start to describe it, it could just be like, I remember when I was, 5 years old, my dad put me on the swing and he was pushing me. And I just felt like, there was just, happiness and joy and innocence and connection. And I'm going, yeah, everyone, I have never talked to someone that hasn't had some experience like that. Even sort of in horrific experiences, they'll find some level of peace that underlies the terror. And not a dissociative peace, actually. A level of connection or peace that might also be there simultaneously if they allowed themselves to be there. So I think it's our birthright. I really do. But it might take some, we could use the word practice, but the first step is just putting our attention on it.
And one of the ways that I heard that described is, so yes, as we're our birthright, we're open, we're connected, and then as we integrate into society, there's almost the shutting down and weaving in that kind of like the second birth type of thing where you're opening back up from a more
absolutely
mature point or perspective, just a different perspective, really, as we could say. as we were talking about young people, I want to see if we can touch into this. We may not have to have. Maybe we talk again, Cielle.
Yeah, maybe we talk again. How cool is that?
That would be awesome. But we briefly touched on this at one point about younger people in the sense of what I've termed cosmic PTSD, just this kind of really anxiety and it is almost like a PTSD with no distinction, like no pinpointing on where and when or something like that. Do you have a sense of that or an idea about that or thoughts about that?
My thoughts about that, and, obviously anyone that's listening to this can, put that in the crazy box if they want to. I mean, really, I want people to really feel empowered to believe this or not. But again, when we talk about the transpersonal, I do feel like some empaths are actually picking up on more the stress of their environment. And there's actually even more evidence of this right now, in the last maybe 5 or 6 years that I've heard of it. A lot of studies are being doing about even, maybe the grandchild of someone who was in the Holocaust, right? And that grandchild who wasn't even their direct descendant, but they're exhibiting the same kind of stress symptoms of someone would exhibit if they had been in that Holocaust. And it doesn't make sense. In fact, they're even finding even sometimes DNA changes that, happen. But it's like, how did this happen? Because, it was like maybe the Holocaust, it doesn't even make sense that it would have gotten into their parents' genes yet. It's a little too close. It's somehow like their parents were already born. And so how did they get that gene transferred? Because their father hadn't been in the Holocaust yet. But so all of those interesting studies that are showing that people are actually being born that are literally showing signs of PTSD, but it's not theirs. And as soon as they can trace it to ancestors, and a lot of the shamanic work we were taught was to actually clear ancestral lines, to really do that. So there can be clearing ancestral lines, and also just clearing people that are sensitive to the communities and feeling, sensitivities to what's going on, not just even in their hometown, because it could be they're picking up things from across the world that are under stress. So yeah, I feel kind of sorry for those young ones that are feeling that we can't pin down like where were they in trauma, but their bodies are showing up as if they were in trauma, as if they'd experienced it themselves. So.
Yes, and so 2 things then. I'm like watching the time. We, as we clear these lines of stuff, backwards and forwards in time, do you think that goes back into it?
Yes, I agree. Backwards and forwards. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And then, like last night, and this was strange. I've been an angry person for a lot of points in my life, and I am an empath, and I feel energy, and I would drive down the road and just start sobbing and not know why, and like at times never found out why. Last night, so what is today? I don't know, someday in August. Last night I woke up in the middle of the night, which I never do. I sleep really well. I woke up. I was enraged. I was so angry. I could not pinpoint, and I had all these different things that came, and at one point I was finally like, this might just be a little bit bigger than myself, because it's exponentially, it's not, it doesn't go with any experience I have. The feelings of rage that I was having was exponentially above any kind of situation that I had been even, the past couple weeks. And I've worked a lot of process. And then today there was a lot of sadness that came after. Still don't know exactly what. I'm sure some of it's mine. I'm not working it just for, it's self and other, but it's still, there's, do you still have that kind of thing as you've moved?
It's interesting. I feel like as I keep processing, this has been a multi-decades, expression of mine of processing these places inside of me. But I was actually surprised just only earlier in the month I was in Europe, and for the first time went to areas of Germany and Austria and Budapest that had been heavily bombed. And one of the most touching memorials that I saw was just a set of something like 60 pairs of iron shoes that have been cast and left by the Danube, because there were, and not just Nazis, and I don't want to Jews, I want to respect the fact that most of them were Jews, but they could have just been someone whose sexual precision wasn't, good, or were maybe from Poland or some other country that these people didn't like, and they were taken down to the river, asked to remove their shoes because shoes were still a valuable commodity, and then for sort of efficiency shot into the river, because then you don't have to bury the body either. It just floats away. And and so they have these 60 pairs of shoes, and they're all classes. There's workmen's shoes, and there's women's pumps, and there's children's shoes, and they're just 60 pairs out of the hundreds and hundreds that were taken to the river and killed. And I'm still processing that. I mean, there was a part of me that wanted to not think that literally less than 10 years before I was born this was happening. It's like I wanted to relegate this happened 500 years ago, even though I knew that it didn't. But to see these shoes and see their shoes that my grandmother used to wear, like, oh, they represented people and families whose lives were taken because of racial, hatred, and which is still happening obviously today. But yes, I mean, that actually, I felt that in my body in ways that I didn't expect to feel. So again, but that time at least I had the reference point. Ooh, and it was kind of like, thank you, Budapest, for giving me this reminder that we need to find solutions. I mean, and also not to pretend that it's not just below the surface, but how can we work with this tension rather than keep covering it up and covering it over? So yeah.
Okay, I feel like we should bring it back around.
Okay, yeah, right. Let's bring it back around to something other than empaths that get overloaded with
Yeah, I mean, everything has like I always call it a blessing and a curse to be an empath. It's that, and I mean, it's a lifelong learning, right? We're never done. If we're on this planet, we've still got stuff that we're working with. And we're always, that's what I love about yoga. They talk about there's always more. It's not the end. You can merge with the oneness and that's still that. And there's a possibility to spin back off, or however you want to talk about it. But it is this kind of double-edged, figuring out, I don't want to even say double-edged sword, just figuring out how to wield your power, how to wield your sword, and how to get in that place where you are. Empowered, I think, has been a word that's been used so much, it's almost one of those words that doesn't really have meaning anymore, but it's the only word that I come to, where we are standing in who we are and able to bring our gifts to the world and be seen, in whatever capacity is our journey, whatever our kind of mission is. But maybe something, or anything that you have in relation to that, of kind of holding your power, or
and also, just maybe as a little suggestion for people that are finding themselves empathic and not knowing how to roll with that. Well, first of all, like you were saying, with this anger, the sadness, first of all, let it just come out. Find appropriate ways that aren't damaging other people or property, that you can actually be with those feelings. And it sometimes means that you need to be with support of another person who won't shame you or blame you as those roll out of you. So that can be a very helpful thing to do. It's not like there's anything wrong with you. You're just noticing a storm as if rising in you. And so what will you do with that storm? Let it come forth like any other storm in nature. Let it be there. And but at the same time, if it's a really bad hurricane storm, we want to batten down the hatches and let it come out in a way that nobody gets hurt. But at the same time, when that storm has kind of finished its course, I sometimes just like to suggest to people something as simple as this: to just ask, the expression would be, invite your body to reveal to you something right now that feels like it's in flow, or at ease, or moving forward. Because those are also there. They can get eclipsed. And so we might have to let that storm pass through. But then I invite my body to show me what feels good in this moment. And then to savor it, even for just half a minute. Because we don't often take time to savor the feelings that feel life-giving. And it can be something like, I just feel like a little bit of ease in my heart right now, or maybe not even there, maybe just feel a little ease in my fingers right now. But where is it that there feels flow or ease or forward motion? And just savor it, but your body's also willing to show you that, it's like, yeah. So, and that can be a way to let things again turn and settle, and then from that state of finding a place of greater ease, then you might want to take action. Maybe it's even a kind of a sacred activation to produce change in the world. What was it that I was feeling? Where should I put my attention now? How can I make change? Be an agent of change. But, first to let your own physiology settle so that you'll make a responsive step instead of a reactive step. Sometimes reaction is necessary, but it sounded like in those cases it wasn't anything was immediately threatened to you.
Yeah, no.
So
You didn't need to react to anything. You just needed to let it go through you, which I'm sure is what you do. So I'm more talking for other people that might be listening to this. But then afterwards, if it feels still like, ooh, kind of not very comfortable, what does comfort feel like? We know that. Our bodies know that.
Right. It's our, what did you call it? Our birthright. It's our heritage. We can't get away from it. And if we allow ourselves to time and space to note it, even if it's for 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, whatever we can give ourselves. And that can be, and it gets into our cells, it gets into our physiology. It's our energy, but it gets into our physiology. It works in our mind.
Exactly.
I love that. Thank you so much, Cielle. We're pretty much at time. Anything that you have to add? That's a beautiful close. We can leave it there. Anything that feels unfinished?
Oh, no, just it's been delightful, and I could imagine having greatly many more conversations. We just touched on so many things, but just with little teaspoons, and we could talk about any of these things in big gallons worth, and that would be lovely to do sometime.
I am definitely going to be in touch with you, yes. Thank you so much for your time. I love you so much.
Oh, I love you too. Thank you. Thank you.